I was reborn. I returned to the very day my husband Michael Johnson said he wanted to leave the army and go into business. Outside the window, the poplar trees in the military compound drooped under the scorching afternoon sun. The cicadas' cries grew louder and louder, their shrill song gnawing at my nerves. Inside the room, Michael stood tall in his crisp, perfectly pressed uniform. The 2 bars and 1 star on his shoulder gleamed in the sunlight. He was my pride, my young, accomplished major, and to outsiders, I was the privileged daughter of a high-ranking official who had married down for love. At that moment, his thick brows were drawn together, his face alight with the passion of unfulfilled ambition and hope for the future. "Emily, I've made up my mind," he said firmly. "This trip to the South showed me incredible business opportunities. The army job is stable, sure, but it's a dead end. I want to take a chance while I'm still young. I've already submitted my resignation." His voice sounded exactly as I remembered, steady, confident, and leaving no room for doubt. I looked at him quietly, my heart tightening as though an invisible hand had gripped it, the pain so sharp I could barely breathe. It was those very words that had marked the beginning of my tragedy in my previous life. Back then, I was completely carried away by the dream he painted. I loved him, deeply, to my bones. From the moment my father's old comrade brought him home, a tall young man in a faded uniform, his eyes bright and honest, his smile shy, I had fallen for him. I ignored my parents' objections, ignored the gap between our families, and married him without hesitation. After our marriage, I used every bit of my family's influence and resources to pave his path, helping him rise step by step from a rural soldier to the position he held then. So when he said he wanted to start a business, I didn't think twice. I gave him all our savings and even took out the 200,000 yuan my parents had left me for emergencies. I foolishly believed we were a team, working together for a better future. But reality was cruel. His ventures failed one after another. Each time he lost everything, came home dejected, held me in his arms, and said, "I'm sorry, honey, I failed again. But trust me, next time, I'll make it." And every time I believed him. Every time I covered the losses he left behind. I put aside my pride and temper, learned to run the household, lived frugally, and saved every penny so that he and our son could have the best. Until the day I lay on that cold hospital bed, dying from late-stage cancer, needing targeted treatment to stay alive. That was when I finally discovered the truth. The joint account I thought had long been empty wasn't empty at all. Every supposed business loss, every missing sum had been transferred, millions at a time, into another woman's account. Her name was Samantha Lee. She was his white moonlight, the first love he had met years ago during his rural assignment. What's even more ridiculous was that the house we had lived in for 10 years, the one I bought with my dowry, had her name, Samantha Lee, clearly printed on the property deed. The marriage I had once been so proud of turned out to be a 15-year-long, carefully orchestrated lie. I, Emily Parker, the only daughter of a powerful family, had been nothing more than a fool, a bottomless source of money and connections for him to climb higher. Michael hadn't married me out of love. He married me to use me, to step upward, to take my money, and to support the woman he truly loved and their illegitimate child. Before I died, my son, Ethan Johnson, knelt beside my hospital bed, crying and begging, "Mom, please hold on, I'll ask Dad to bring the money back so you can get treatment." I held his cold little hand, unable to speak a word. And then I saw Michael standing at the doorway of the hospital room, looking at me with the cold indifference one reserves for a stranger. Beside him stood Samantha, her smile gentle and sweet as she wrapped her arm around his and whispered softly, "Michael, let's go. Don't let this place's bad energy affect our baby," Samantha said softly. At that moment, a surge of hatred so overwhelming tore through my frail body that I thought it would consume me completely. I died with my eyes open, unwilling, full of resentment. Maybe my hatred was too deep, because somehow heaven gave me another chance. "Emily, are you even listening to me?" Michael's impatient voice yanked me back to the present. Seeing that I hadn't spoken for a long time, he raised his tone. "I know this is sudden, but I'm doing it for our family. Give me the bank book. I need startup money." He held out his hand, as if that money had always been his to control. I blinked, my mind snapping into focus. My gaze moved slowly from his handsome but deceitful face to the wall calendar. August 12, 1998. It wasn't too late. Everything could still be changed. I took a deep breath, forcing down the storm in my chest as my expression turned cold. Standing up, I walked to the bedroom and unlocked the drawer. Inside was the familiar blue bank book. Michael's eyes lit up instantly, his lips curling into a confident smile that reeked of entitlement. As I stepped closer and reached out, he extended his hand eagerly to take it. But just before he could touch it, I quickly pulled it back and shoved it into my pocket. Meeting his startled gaze, I said coldly, word by word, "I'm not lending you this money." The smile on his face froze. He stared at me in disbelief. "Emily, what's that supposed to mean? This isn't a loan. It's our shared money, our marital assets. It's an investment in our future." I let out a bitter laugh and met his eyes head-on. "Michael, does your future include me?" "What nonsense are you talking about?" he snapped, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. His voice rose, his composure cracking. "I've worked myself to the bone for this family, and you say something like that? Emily, are you throwing another one of your spoiled princess fits again?" That line again. In my past life, every time I questioned him even slightly, he'd use that same accusation to shut me down, to make me feel unreasonable, selfish, ungrateful. But this time, I wasn't falling for his manipulation again. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said sharply. I had no patience left to argue. I turned to go back to the bedroom, but suddenly his hand shot out and clamped around my wrist, hard enough to crush bone. "Give me the bank book," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, his eyes glinting with something dark. "Don't make me use force, Emily." Pain shot up my arm, but my gaze stayed icy cold. "Try it, Michael. Go ahead, see what happens." I met his stare without fear. "Don't forget how you got that uniform you're so proud of. Without my father, you'd still be farming in that little village. You dare lay a hand on me? Believe it or not, I could have my dad strip that uniform off you tomorrow." The mention of my father, General Parker, was the one thing he could never overcome. Sure enough, his face went pale, and his grip loosened slightly, though he still didn't let go. "So that's it? You're using your father to threaten me now?" He spat, his chest heaving with anger. "I really misjudged you, Emily. I thought you were different from those shallow, petty women." I smirked coldly, rubbing my reddened wrist. "Oh, you didn't misjudge me at all, Michael. You saw me perfectly clearly. You saw that I came from a powerful family. You saw that my father could be your stepping stone. You saw that I loved you so deeply I'd give you everything, no matter what you asked for." My voice dripped with sarcasm. "You played your cards well, didn't you?" Michael froze completely. He just stood there staring at me, speechless, because he had never imagined that I, the obedient, adoring wife who had always hung on his every word, would one day look him in the eye and say something like that. He stared straight at me, his eyes filled with scrutiny and a strange sense of unfamiliarity. "What's wrong with you today?" "I just finally figured things out," I said calmly. "Michael, you submitted your resignation from the army on your own. Whatever happens next, you'll face the consequences yourself. If you want to start a business, fine, but find your own way to fund it. The money my parents left me is my final safety net. I won't give you a single penny." I paused, then dropped the real bombshell. "Since we clearly can't live like this anymore, let's get a divorce." Divorce. That single word exploded in his ears like thunder. He lunged at me, his hands gripping my shoulders, shaking me violently. "Emily, are you out of your mind? Say that again." I said, "Let's get a divorce," I shouted, my head spinning from his shaking, but I forced the words out anyway. "I don't want to live with a hypocritical, selfish man like you anymore." You, his face turned red with fury. He pointed at me, trembling, but no words came out of his mouth. Just then, the sound of a key turning in the lock came from outside. "Michael! Emily! I'm home!" My mother-in-law's loud voice, Linda Johnson, echoed from the hallway. The moment she stepped through the door and saw us at each other's throats, she immediately dropped the groceries she was carrying and rushed over. "Oh my, what's going on here? Michael, let go of her. How could you raise your hand against Emily?" she said, but her actions didn't match her words. She only gave his arm a light, symbolic pat, her eyes filled with disapproval, directed at me. Michael finally released me. as if finding support in her presence. Mom, you have to do something. Emily's lost it. She says she wants to divorce me. Linda's eyes widened in shock. She turned to me, looking me up and down with a judgmental stare, as if I had just confessed to some unspeakable crime. Divorce? Emily, what nonsense are you talking about? You two have a perfectly good life. Why would you talk about divorce? Did Michael do something wrong? Tell me, dear, and I'll make sure he gets a good talking to. Her tone sounded gentle, but I knew better. Deep down, she had probably already cursed me 1,000 times. In my previous life, she had always been like this, always siding with her son. When Michael's business failed, she'd hint and gossip that I wasn't a lucky wife, that I didn't bring him success. When I gave birth to a son, she still found fault, complaining that I hadn't given her a granddaughter to carry on the family line. Whenever I so much as disagreed with her, she'd spread rumors around the military compound that her daughter-in-law was spoiled and unfilial. Mom, don't bother asking, Michael cut in before I could reply. She's just having one of her spoiled princess tantrums again. She's mad because I didn't do what she wanted. Spoiled princess? I laughed bitterly. Michael, you're throwing away a bright military career for this so-called business opportunity, draining every last cent of our savings, and I'm the one being unreasonable for objecting? Mom, you tell me, do you think what he's doing makes any sense? I turned the question toward Linda directly. She froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to confront her so openly. Her eyes flickered as she cleared her throat, putting on a tone of fake concern. Emily, she said slowly, Michael's doing this for the sake of the family. A man needs to have his own career. And look around, policies are getting better every year. Everyone who's gone into business is making money these days, Linda said earnestly. We can't hold Michael back, can we? Besides, you're husband and wife. What's yours is his. Why draw such a hard line? A family should think and work as one. What's mine is his. I let out a cold laugh. Now I see it clearly, you're all the same. My voice was icy as I said, this money was left to me by my parents. It's not part of our marital assets. If Michael wants to start a business, that's his decision, but he's not getting a single cent from me. And as for the marriage, I'm done. We're getting a divorce, whether you like it or not. Linda's face darkened immediately, her kind and gentle mask falling away. Emily, don't be ungrateful. If it weren't for your family's background, do you think my son would have married you? Now that your wings have grown, you want to kick him aside? I'm warning you, over my dead body. As long as I'm alive, you're not divorcing Michael. Michael joined in coldly. Don't forget, Emily. You're part of the Johnson family now. You were born a Johnson's wife, and you'll die a Johnson's widow. Looking at the mother and son standing there with their twisted faces, I felt nothing but disgust. I couldn't even stomach another word with them. I turned around, went into the bedroom, and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. Outside, Linda's shrill voice started yelling again, accompanied by Michael's angry kicks against the door. Emily, open up! You think you can just decide everything now? Who do you think runs this house? Open the damn door! I ignored them completely. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt my body trembling slightly, not from fear this time, but from fury and a grim determination that burned deep inside me. My hand slipped into my pocket and brushed against the thin bank book inside. That little book was my strength, my last line of defense, and my weapon in this new life. Michael, Linda, and that woman hiding in the shadows, Samantha, you owe me. Every debt, every wound, I'll make you pay it all back, with interest. The shouting outside went on for a long time until our neighbor, Mrs. Wang, came knocking. Michael, what's going on? Couples fight, sure, but keep it private, okay? Don't make such a scene in the courtyard. It doesn't look good. Sorry to make you laugh, Mrs. Wang, Linda said, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. It's nothing. Emily's just in a bad mood, throwing a little tantrum, that's all. I leaned quietly against the door, listening. After a while, the living room finally grew quiet. I guess they were huddled together, coming up with their next move. Sure enough, a few minutes later, there was another knock at my door. This time it was Michael, his tone much softer than before. Emily, open up. Let's talk. I was too impulsive earlier, I shouldn't have lost my temper. A slap followed by a sugar date. Classic Michael. That was how he had controlled me in my past life. Every time he lowered his voice or spoke gently, I would soften. I'd tell myself he was just under stress, that he didn't mean it, and then I'd forgive him. Over and over I'd compromise until there was nothing left of me. But not this time. Now his voice only made my stomach turn. I stayed silent. He knocked a few more times, and when I didn't respond, he started talking through the door. Emily, I know you're just upset right now. I've thought this business through carefully. I have a buddy down in Shenzhen who runs an electronics factory. Doing great, really successful. I went to check it out myself, and the market prospects are incredible. If we just invest 200,000 yuan, we can secure an agency deal. In 3 years, we'll double the money, easy. Then we can buy a bigger house, get a car, give you the good life you've always wanted. His tone softened even more, coaxing. You've always wanted to travel to Europe, right? Once I make it big, I'll take you there. You'll finally get to live the life you deserve. He was painting the same pretty dream as before, using fantasies of a bright future to lure me in. If I were still the naive woman I used to be, maybe I would have fallen for it again. But now I knew the truth. That so-called buddy in Shenzhen was nothing but an excuse. The so-called investment was just money he planned to send directly to Samantha Lee. He kept on spending recklessly. But I remained silent. Outside the door, Michael seemed to be losing his patience. Emily, what exactly do you want? Do you have to go against me on everything? Don't forget, we still have Ethan. Do you really want him growing up in a broken home? He was actually using our son to threaten me. The moment he mentioned Ethan, my heart clenched. In my previous life, when I died, Ethan was only 14. He had knelt by my hospital bed, crying so hard it tore my heart apart. My greatest regret was not being able to watch him grow up. In this life, I would protect not only myself, but also my son. I wouldn't let him repeat the same fate, ruined by an irresponsible father and a cruel stepmother. I opened the door and stared coldly at Michael. So you do remember we have a son. But tell me, does a man who would throw away a stable career and drain every cent of his family's savings for some unrealistic dream deserve to call himself a father? That's not some unrealistic dream, he snapped, his voice rising with agitation. Whether it's a dream or a fantasy doesn't matter to me, I said sharply. All I know is that your current job gives Ethan the best education and a stable life. Once you give that up, if your so-called business fails, how are you going to secure his future? My words hit him hard. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because deep down he knew I was right. Without my family's support and his meager military pay, he had nothing. After a long silence, he finally muttered, I'll succeed. Then we'll talk about it when you actually do, I said coldly, cutting him off. Until you have a concrete, feasible plan and find an investor who isn't me, you won't get a single penny. I'll prepare the divorce papers as soon as possible. You can sign them when they're ready. I didn't bother to look at his darkened face again. I turned and walked out. I'm going to pick up Ethan from school. Ethan was 7 that year, in 1st grade at the Military Dependence Elementary School. When I arrived at the school gate, he was wearing his little backpack, running toward me like a happy little bird. Mom! I knelt down and wrapped him tightly in my arms, tears almost spilling from my eyes. My sweet boy, still so small, still so innocent. Thank God I still had time to make things right. Mom, why are you here to pick me up today? Where's Dad? Ethan asked curiously, tilting his little face up at me. Usually, Michael was the one who picked him up. Daddy's busy today, I said gently, brushing his hair. From now on, Mommy will come pick you up after school every day. How does that sound? Really, yay? Ethan cheered happily. I took his small hand in mine, and we walked home together under the golden glow of sunset. Our shadows stretched long on the pavement. I made up my mind right then. Starting today, I would build a new future for myself and my son. When we got home, Linda and Michael were sitting in the living room, both wearing dark expressions. But the moment she saw me holding Ethan's hand, Linda quickly replaced her scowl with a wide, fake smile and waved. Oh, my sweet grandson's home. Come here, Ethan, come to Grandma. Ethan glanced at me, hesitant, not moving. In my previous life, Linda's obsession with carrying on the family line had deeply affected him. She used to whisper to him constantly, saying things like, if only your mom would give you a little brother. Over time, Ethan had grown distant from her. I crouched down beside him and said softly, "Ethan, go do your homework. When you're done, Mommy will make you something delicious, okay?" "Okay." He nodded obediently and ran to his room. As soon as he disappeared down the hall, the tension in the living room thickened again. The air felt heavy, like the calm before another storm. Linda's fake smile finally slipped. Her voice turned sharp and mocking. "Well, aren't you the ungrateful little snake? Seems I can't even compare to a stepmother in this house." My eyes went cold. "Mom," I said icily, "who exactly are you calling a stepmother?" She smirked, feigning innocence. "Oh, I didn't say any names. If the shoe fits. Careful with your words," I cut her off. "You can eat carelessly, but you can't talk carelessly." Straightening my posture, I looked down at her with calm authority. "I, Emily Parker, am Ethan's biological mother. I carried him for 10 months and gave birth to him myself. But some people," I glanced between her and Michael, "seem to have other thoughts. Maybe they'd rather bring some bastard from outside into this house and make me the stepmother." My words hit like a knife, sinking straight into both of their hearts. Michael shot up from the couch, his face turning pale. "Emily, what the hell is that supposed to mean?" Linda froze for a moment before jabbing her finger at me in fury. You're talking nonsense. How dare you slander us like that? My son would never do something so shameful." I looked at their panicked faces and couldn't help a cold, bitter smile. So Linda knew all about Samantha and that illegitimate child, I thought. Maybe she even helped hide it. In my past life, I must have been blind to have treated these wolves as family. "Whether I'm lying or not," I said quietly, "you both know the truth better than anyone." I was done wasting breath on them. "Michael, I'll make this simple for you. You have 2 options. First, stay in the army, keep your job, and stop entertaining any wild dreams. If you do that, I'll postpone the divorce for now. But from this day forward, our finances will be completely separate. You'll hand over your salary card, and I'll manage the household expenses. Second, if you insist on starting a business, then we're done. We'll divorce immediately, and you'll walk away with nothing." "Ethan stays with me." "Walk away with nothing? Why should I?" Michael leapt to his feet, his face red. "This house was bought after we got married. It's our marital property." I actually laughed, tears stinging the corners of my eyes from the absurdity of it all. "You really have the nerve to say that, Michael? The down payment for this house, 200,000 yuan, came from the dowry my parents gave me. Back then, your monthly army allowance was barely 100 yuan. You didn't contribute a single cent, yet you dare call this our house? The mortgage, we both paid for it." He stammered, his voice cracking. "Oh, really?" I opened a drawer, pulled out the Bank payment slips, and threw them in front of him. "Here are the monthly repayment records. Every single payment came from my salary account. And what about your allowance? You spent it on cigarettes, liquor, sent money to your mother and relatives back in your village. What exactly did you contribute here?" The evidence was clear as day. Michael's face turned red, then white, then red again. He couldn't utter a single word. Seeing her son cornered, Linda lunged forward, trying to snatch the receipts. "Let me see those. I don't believe it. My son sends me money every month. How could he not have any?" I shoved her back and quickly gathered the papers. "You'll see these again, in court. You vile woman." Linda was trembling with rage, her voice shaking. "Our Johnson family must have been cursed for 8 generations to marry a jinx like you." "Right back at you," I said coldly. "Guess we were all unlucky. This was a battle I had to win, for Ethan and for the woman I used to be, the one who died miserable and betrayed." That night, Michael and I slept in separate rooms. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of muffled voices in the living room. "Mom, what do we do now?" It was Michael's voice, low, angry, anxious. "She's not buying it anymore, and she knows about Samantha." "How should I know what to do?" Linda hissed back. "It's all your fault," that Linda hissed in a low voice. "You couldn't keep your mouth shut. You just had to bring it up today. Samantha's been pushing, saying if you don't send the money soon, her kid won't be able to pay his school fees. How was I supposed to know she'd act like she's lost her mind today?" Michael muttered bitterly. "She used to believe everything I said." Enough, Linda snapped. "Complaining won't fix anything now. The priority is to calm her down. You can't let her go running to your father-in-law. You know exactly what kind of temper that man has. If he finds out you've been seeing another woman, he'll skin you alive." "Fine," Michael said after a pause. "Tomorrow, I'll talk to her again. I'll apologize, play nice, once I get the money." Their voices dropped too low for me to hear the rest, but I didn't need to. I already knew their plan, to pretend to make peace, to win back my trust, and then take my money. They were playing the same old game. Too bad for them. I wasn't the same naive woman anymore. The next morning, just as I expected, Michael put on a new face. He got up early, something he almost never did, and actually made breakfast. He brought it over to me, smiling with fake warmth. "Emily," he said gently, "try this. I made your favorite egg noodles. It's been a while since I cooked for you." I looked down at the perfectly arranged poached eggs floating in the bowl, feeling nothing. In my previous life, moments like this would have melted my heart. I would have thought he was the best husband in the world. Now, I knew better. It was nothing but crocodile tears. I didn't touch the food. My voice was flat. "If you have something to say, just say it." His smile faltered for a second, but he quickly forced it back. "Emily, I was wrong yesterday. I shouldn't have lost my temper. Don't be mad, okay? We can take our time discussing the business. But about my resignation, it's already been submitted. It's hard to withdraw now." "That's your problem," I cut him off coldly. "I made myself very clear yesterday. I'm not giving you any money." "Emily," he said softly, grabbing my hand, his tone pleading. "If not for me, then for Ethan. Please, think about it again. I swear, this time will be different. I'll make it work. Once I make money, I'll cut things off with Samantha completely." He'd finally slipped up. Inside I sneered, but outwardly I stayed calm. "Cut things off? Are you sure you can do that?" "Of course I can," he said earnestly. "I promise, Emily, you and Ethan mean everything to me. I was foolish before, blinded by my own pride, but now I understand, family is what truly matters." If I hadn't been reborn, maybe his performance would have fooled me again. The sincerity in his voice, the way his eyes softened, it all looked so convincing, but I had seen what lay behind it. A man who could lie to his wife for 15 years, drain her family's wealth, and even withhold her life-saving money, his promises were worth less than dust. I pulled my hand from his grasp. "Michael, save the act. You're making me sick." He froze, shocked that even now, his words had no effect on me. "I've already drafted the divorce papers," I said calmly. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out the neatly prepared document and placed it on the table. "Take a look. If there's no problem, sign it." His face went pale when he saw the bold title, Divorce Agreement. "You're serious about this, Emily? Do you think I'm joking? I've had enough of your games." He snatched up the papers and scanned through them quickly, but when his eyes reached the section on property division, where it clearly stated that he would leave with nothing, that Ethan's custody would go to me, and that he would be required to pay 1,000 yuan in child support every month, his face darkened instantly, fury rising like a storm. He suddenly tore the divorce papers into shreds, the pieces fluttering to the floor like falling snow. "Emily, you've gone too far," he roared. "I'm telling you, I won't agree to this divorce. You think you can just walk away over my dead body?" "Then I'll see you in court," I said calmly. "Domestic violence, adultery, and hiding marital assets. What do you think the judge will say when he sees the evidence? Who do you think he'll grant custody of Ethan to?" "You have no proof," he shouted, trying to sound confident, but his voice cracked. "Really?" I reached into my bag and took out a small voice recorder. "I recorded the conversation you and your mother had in the living room last night. Want to hear it?" I pressed play, and my own cold voice filled the silence as I repeated his mother's words. "Samantha's been pushing, saying if you don't send the money soon, her kid won't be able to pay his school fees." "Is that enough evidence for you?" I asked quietly. Michael's face turned deathly pale. He looked like the ground had just opened up beneath him. He had never imagined that I would have prepared something like this. He stumbled back a step, pointing at me, his lips trembling. "Why you? You actually set me up?" "We're even," I said flatly, slipping the recorder back into my bag. "Compared to the 15 years you and Samantha spent deceiving me and draining my family's money, this little trick hardly counts as revenge." Linda, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly snapped out of it and lunged toward me, trying to grab the recorder. I dodged her easily. "Give that to me," she screamed. "Take one more step," I warned coldly, "and I'll send this recording straight to my father's office." My words hit her like a bucket of ice water. She froze mid-step, her face drained of color. My father, General Parker, deputy commander of the military district, was a man known for his integrity and strict discipline. If he learned that Michael had cheated on me, fathered an illegitimate child, and stolen my assets, he would destroy him without hesitation. Forget resigning or starting a business. Michael would be lucky to keep his uniform, let alone his freedom. That was their fatal weakness. "What do you want, Emily?" Michael finally asked, his tone subdued, laced with a hint of desperation. "We were married for years. Do you really have to be this ruthless?" "Ruthless?" I met his eyes, my voice calm and steady. "Michael, you're the one who made this ruthless. Sign the papers, walk away with nothing, and leave Ethan with me. That's your only choice. Otherwise, I'll see you in court, and we'll make sure the whole military base knows what kind of man you really are." His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles cracked, veins bulging across his forehead. I could see the battle raging in his mind, calculating, weighing the risk. He knew that if this went to court, not only would he lose everything, but his reputation, career, and future would all be destroyed. Leaving with nothing would sting, but at least it would save face and give him a chance to quietly transfer out of the army. After a long, heavy silence, he finally ground out the words through gritted teeth. "Fine, I'll sign." I calmly pulled out another identical copy of the divorce agreement from my bag and laid it in front of him. His hand trembled violently as he picked up the pen, but in the end, he scrawled his name, Michael Johnson, across the signature line. As I stared at those 3 shaky letters, I finally exhaled a long breath. The 15-year nightmare was over at last. Holding the signed papers in my hand, I didn't want to spend another minute in this suffocating house. I went to my room and quickly packed my things and Ethan's. We didn't have much, just a few clothes and some books. Most of the furniture and household items had been bought with my money, but I didn't care. I didn't want a single thing from this place. All I wanted was to leave, now, and for good. When I pulled my suitcase and held Ethan's hand to leave, Linda blocked the doorway like a furious lioness. "You're not going anywhere that easily. Ethan is a Johnson. You can't take him away from us." She reached out, trying to grab him. I immediately pulled Ethan behind me, shielding him with my body, my voice sharp and cold. "Michael has already signed away custody. It's written in black and white. If you try to take him, you'll be breaking the law." "I don't care about your laws," Linda shrieked. "He's my grandson, and I won't let you steal him." She started making a scene, her voice shrill and ugly, while Michael sat off to the side like a statue, completely silent and useless. I had no patience left. Pulling out my phone, I said evenly, "If you don't move right now, I'll call my father and let him deal with this." Linda froze instantly. Her glare could have cut through steel, her teeth grinding audibly as she spat. "Fine, you win." She stepped aside, though her eyes burned with venom, as if she wanted to rip a piece of flesh off me. I tightened my grip on Ethan's hand and walked straight out without looking back. The sunlight outside was blindingly bright. I lifted a hand to block it, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I didn't go straight to my parents' house. As much as they loved me, they were traditional people. If they knew I had gotten divorced, they'd scold me endlessly out of worry. I didn't want them to stress over me, not yet. I decided to wait until everything was settled before telling them. Ethan and I found a small hotel nearby and checked in for the time being. Once we were settled, the first thing I did was go to the bank. I transferred every cent of my personal savings into a new account under my name alone, and I filed a loss report to freeze the joint account. "Michael Johnson," I thought coldly, "you won't get a single penny from me ever again." When I finished, a heavy weight finally lifted from my chest. I glanced at Ethan sitting quietly beside me, reading a picture book, and my heart softened. Without that bloodsucker in our lives, I could finally give my son the life he deserved. With my abilities and family background, we'd be more than fine. We'd thrive. The next morning, I took the signed divorce agreement and all the necessary documents to the Civil Affairs Bureau. When I walked out, holding the small dark green divorce certificate in my hands, I exhaled deeply and smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Congratulations, Emily," I whispered to myself. "You're reborn." Now it was time to rebuild, not as someone's wife, but as myself. In my previous life, I had given up everything for Michael, my ambitions, my dreams, my talent. I had become nothing more than a housewife. Yet I wasn't an ordinary woman. I had graduated from one of the country's top finance universities, known even back then for my extraordinary intuition in investment. My professor used to call me a born trader. If it hadn't been for Michael, I might have already built a name for myself in the financial world. But this time, I wouldn't waste my second chance. It was 1998, the dawn of China's booming internet and real estate era. Opportunities were everywhere for those who dared to seize them. I had about 300,000 yuan in total, 200,000 from my parents' dowry, and another 100,000 I had saved myself. That was a small fortune in those days. I decided to split the money into two parts. One portion would go into the stock market. I remembered clearly which technology and consumer stocks would skyrocket in the coming years. Some would rise like rockets. The other portion, I would invest in real estate. I knew that housing prices in Beijing were still low at this time, especially beyond the Fourth Ring Road. Properties there were practically being given away. But soon as the city expanded and preparations for the Olympic Games began, those same properties would multiply in value. Tenfold, even 100-fold. And this time, I was determined to be ready when that golden tide came. Once I made up my mind, I wasted no time taking action. First, I went to a securities company and opened a trading account. I invested the 100,000 yuan I had set aside exactly as I'd planned, putting it all into the few tech and consumer stocks I knew would skyrocket. Then I started scouting the real estate market without rest. My targets were two relatively underdeveloped areas at the time, Wangjing and Tongzhou, both of which I knew would later become prime districts with soaring property prices. After several days of research and visits, I finally settled on a brand new residential complex in Wangjing. Using a little over 200,000 yuan, I bought a 120 square meter 3-bedroom apartment, paid in full. After that purchase, I had very little cash left, but I wasn't worried. I knew these investments would yield huge returns soon enough. Once I had arranged our new home, I transferred Ethan to a nearby international elementary school with a much better education program. Everything was finally moving in the right direction. During this time, Michael called me several times. His discharge request had been approved, but without the money he had planned to take from me, his business dream completely collapsed. On the phone, he cursed at me furiously, blaming me for ruining his life. I simply replied coldly, "You ruined your own life," and hung up. Not long after, my father called, asking why Michael had suddenly left the army. I brushed it off lightly, saying he wanted to try his luck in business, and I supported his decision. I didn't mention the divorce, not yet. I didn't want my personal mess to affect my father's work. After all, Michael had once been one of his trusted subordinates. If the scandal became public, it would only embarrass my father. Better to let Michael fade quietly from everyone's memory like a stone sinking to the bottom of a lake. Day by day, time passed peacefully. And just as I had predicted, the stock market began to surge. The few stocks I'd bought steadily climbed in value. Within a single month, my account had doubled, from 100,000 to 200,000 yuan. I didn't get greedy. Once I hit my target, I sold immediately and reinvested the profits into the next promising wave. Little by little, my capital snowballed, growing faster and faster. 6 months later, my stock portfolio had surpassed 1 million yuan. At the same time, the apartment I bought in Wangjing quietly began to appreciate in value. I started using my stock profits to buy more properties, expanding beyond residential homes into shops and office buildings. My wealth grew like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger and faster with every turn. A year later, I had become a genuine millionaire. I hired the best tutors for Ethan and took him traveling around the world to broaden his horizons. He grew happier, brighter, and more confident with each passing day. Seeing his cheerful smile and healthy spirit, I felt that everything I had done, all the pain, all the struggle, had been worth it. Meanwhile, life wasn't so kind to Michael. Without my financial backing, his entrepreneurial dreams completely shattered. After his discharge, he was assigned to a failing state-owned company, earning a meager salary. Every day, he dragged himself through life, full of regret and frustration. As for Samantha, his so-called one true love, the moment she realized he couldn't provide for her, she dropped him without hesitation. She took her child and married a wealthy Hong Kong businessman. Michael lost both his reputation and his fortune. He became the biggest laughingstock in the entire military compound. Linda, humiliated by her son's downfall, could no longer hold her head high. She rarely left the house, too ashamed to face anyone. On the rare occasions we crossed paths, she would glare at me with burning resentment, as if everything I had achieved was something I had stolen from her son. I could only smile faintly. People like that. There's no reasoning with them. We live in different worlds now. We were already people from two different worlds. Another year passed, and my father finally reached retirement age. At the banquet held in his honor, I decided it was time to tell him everything about my divorce from Michael. He was silent for a long time after I finished speaking. Then he sighed deeply, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said quietly, "I was wrong about him. You've suffered, Emily." I shook my head and smiled. "No, Dad, I haven't suffered. I'm doing really well now." And it was true. I was doing well. I had a loving family, an adorable son, and a thriving career. My life was no longer lived for anyone else. It was entirely my own. After the banquet, I drove home with Ethan. On the way, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but the moment I answered, I heard a voice that was both familiar and strange. "Emily, it's me, Michael Johnson." His voice sounded older, hoarse, and tired. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. I saw you," he said after a pause, "at your father's retirement banquet." There was a trace of jealousy in his tone. "You look like you're doing really well." "Thanks to you," I replied coldly. Silence hung between us for a long moment before he finally spoke again, his voice low and almost pleading. "Emily, can we meet? I want to see Ethan." My first instinct was to refuse, but then I hesitated. Ethan was his son after all, and he had the right to see him, and maybe I wanted him to see for himself what he had thrown away. "Fine," I said at last. "There's a cafe on West Street, tomorrow at 3 p.m. After hanging up, Ethan looked up from the back seat and asked softly, "Mom, was that Dad?" I stroked his hair gently. "Yeah? Do you want to see him?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "He's not a good dad." My chest tightened. I pulled him into my arms and whispered, "That's okay, honey. You have me, and that's enough." The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe right on time. Michael was already there, sitting by the window. His suit was faded and wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and deep shadows had settled under his eyes. He looked at least 10 years older than he really was, a far cry from the confident, ambitious officer I once knew. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, his movements hurried and awkward. "You came." I nodded and sat down across from him. "Where's Ethan?" he asked, looking around. "He didn't want to come," I said truthfully. A flicker of disappointment and embarrassment crossed his face. "I guess I wasn't much of a father." He gave a bitter laugh that sounded more like a sigh. A waiter came by and we placed our orders. I asked for a latte, he ordered a glass of water. "I heard you've done really well for yourself," he said carefully, watching me with a mix of emotions, admiration, envy, and regret. "I'm doing fine," I said simply, unwilling to offer details. "I just never thought you were so capable," he murmured. "All those years, I thought you were just some pampered rich girl. I figured once you left me, you wouldn't survive a day on your own." I couldn't help but smile, though there was no warmth in it. "No, Michael, you didn't think that. You hoped it." His face stiffened. I continued evenly, my tone calm but sharp. "You hoped I'd fall apart without you. You hoped I'd come crawling back, begging you to take me back, because that's the only way you could satisfy your pathetic pride." His face turned a blotchy shade of red, his lips trembling. "That's not true," he said, his voice rising, but there was no conviction behind it. "Isn't it?" I asked quietly, my gaze steady. "You know the answer better than anyone." I lifted my coffee cup and took a slow sip. "Go on," I said calmly. "Why did you really ask to meet me today? If you're here to borrow money, don't bother." His body stiffened, as if I'd struck the very thought he'd been hiding. He lowered his head, fingers twisting together, silent for a long time before he finally looked up again. His eyes were bloodshot. "Emily, I regret it," he said hoarsely, his voice trembling with a hint of choked emotion. "If only I hadn't listened to Samantha's lies. If only I hadn't divorced you. Maybe things could still be the way they were." "There's no if," I cut him off coldly. "Michael, you're not sorry for divorcing me. You're sorry you lost your cash machine. You're sorry you lost the support of my father. What you really regret is the miserable life you're living now. If your business had succeeded, if you'd become a millionaire, you wouldn't even remember my name." My words sliced through the air like a knife, cutting straight into the ugliest part of his heart. He slumped back into his chair, pale and defeated. I'm sorry," he finally whispered. "You're not sorry to me," I said, looking at him steadily. "The one you truly owe an apology to is Ethan." At the mention of our son, his shoulders trembled. I know. My mom went to see you a few days ago," he said hesitantly. I raised an eyebrow. It was true. Linda had shown up a few days earlier. She was nothing like the arrogant, sharp-tongued woman she used to be. This time, she had come begging me to let Ethan visit her one last time. She said she was dying and wanted to see her grandson before she passed. I had looked at her frail, aged face and felt nothing. "You reap what you sow." I told Ethan he could decide for himself. In the end, he shook his head and said quietly, "I don't have a grandma, so I didn't make him go." I repeated it to Michael in an even tone. "I let Ethan choose. He said no." Michael closed his eyes in pain. "It's karma?" he muttered bitterly. Soft piano music played through the cafe speakers, but the silence between us was heavy and suffocating. After a long pause, he spoke again. This time, there was a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Emily, can we go back? For Ethan's sake. Let's remarry. I swear, I'll change. I'll take care of you both. I'll hand over my salary card to you, do whatever you say, anything. Just give me another chance." I looked at him, almost in disbelief, as if he'd just told me the funniest joke in the world. "Michael," I said slowly, "are you dreaming? Remarry? What makes you think I'd ever take back someone else's discarded trash?" My words hit him like a slap across the face, cutting straight into what little pride he had left. He shot up from his seat, trembling with rage. The glass of water on the table toppled, spilling across his shirt, soaking him from chest to waist. He stood there, drenched and humiliated, glaring at me with eyes full of resentment and wounded pride. "Emily, don't go too far. Don't forget, Ethan is still my son." "So what?" I asked coolly, folding my hands. "You want to fight me for custody? Go ahead, try it. Let's see what you have to fight with now." He froze, speechless once again, because he knew the truth. He had nothing. No stable job, no home of his own, just a shabby room provided by his company. And me? I was a successful woman with multiple properties, financial independence, and a secure future for my son. He looked like a rooster that had just lost a fight, his defiance collapsing as he sank back into his chair. "Emily, please," he said finally, his voice trembling. "I'm begging you, just give me one more chance." He had dropped every last shred of dignity, kneeling before me with desperate eyes, begging for a mercy I no longer had to give. "I already gave you chances," I said with a cold, bitter laugh. "Do you want to know how many? I gave you a chance the day you handed in your resignation from the army. I gave you chances every time your business failed. I gave you chances even when you took my money to support another woman. I gave you chance after chance, and each time you threw it away. You pushed me farther and farther until there was nothing left, until you completely destroyed every ounce of trust I had in you." I looked straight into his eyes, my voice steady and clear. "Michael, do you know what my biggest regret is?" He looked up at me blankly, tears still clinging to his lashes. "My biggest regret," I said slowly, "isn't everything I sacrificed for you. My biggest regret is meeting you at all." Those words crushed him completely. He broke down right there in the cafe, collapsing over the table like a child, sobbing uncontrollably. People around us turned to stare, whispering quietly, but I didn't care. I didn't spare him another glance. I stood up, paid the bill, and walked out of the cafe. The sunlight outside was dazzling. I took a deep breath and felt as if a heavy weight had finally lifted off my chest. That meeting, our final confrontation, was like a long overdue farewell ceremony. With it, I severed every last thread tying me to the past. Michael Johnson would never again exist in my life. On my drive home, my phone rang. It was my father. "Emily," he said gravely, "I just got a call from Michael's supervisor. He tried to kill himself in his dormitory." My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but inside, I felt strangely calm. "He didn't make it," my father continued quietly. His voice was heavy with sadness. "I see," I replied softly. "He left a note," my father added after a pause. "He said he was sorry, to you and to Ethan." "Got it," I said simply, and hung up. My eyes stung as I stared at the endless stream of cars on the road ahead, not for him, but for the version of myself from my past life. The foolish woman who had loved him so deeply, so blindly, that she'd wasted a lifetime on someone who never deserved it. "Michael," I whispered to myself, "you don't need to apologize. Your death is the best ending for both of us. From now on, the mountains are high, the river's long, we owe each other nothing." When I got home, Ethan was sitting in the living room building a Lego set. The moment he saw me, he ran over and threw his arms around me. "Mom, you're back!" I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "Mom's back." From that day forward, I knew that Ethan and I would live well. Our new brilliant life was only just beginning.